For nearly 30 years, rotary Mazdas have been coming to Australia in all shapes and sizes. The first one arrived in 1969 and cost $2,790. It was the R100 Coupe. With a standard 10A motor producing 110 horsepower and weighing only 805 kilos, it managed a quarter mile in 17 seconds, very close to the Alfa GTV6s of its day. And they can still manage an impressive performance. This was at the 97 Fours and Rotaries Nationals. This well-looked-after example has been owned by John for 4 years. He originally had just one reason for buying it.
The power, just the smoothness of the motor.
The biggest improvement over a standard R100 is gained from updating the motor.
It's a standard 12A. I've built it and got it to weigh how it looks just for like a Sunday cruiser type car.
But that wasn't the end of John's improvements.
Put the Weber on. It originally had a points distributor, put Series 2 electronic distributor in it.
A Series 2 RX7 also donated the 5-speed gearbox, replacing the original 4-speed. The rotten handling was harder to improve.
Because it's such a narrow car and they've got such a high centre of gravity, the front tends to, under tight cornering, tends to slide out. I've already lowered it about 2 inches.
One item John did leave standard was the unusual red vinyl interior, a very rare factory option. And if you liked red vinyl, John's for sale ad hit the trading post the week after our shoot. So what can replace a car like this?
Well, I'm sort of making the gradual step. My first car was a 4-cylinder, up to a rotary. Might try V8 next. Fast fours and rotaries I always love. I'm just going to try my hand at that, and then I'll see. I'm pretty sure I'll be back to a rotary.
In 1970, the R100 was joined by the RX2, also known as the Capella rotary. Using Mazda's new 12A motor, it managed 130 horsepower and surged to a 16.3 quarter mile, almost as quick as the famed Tirana XU1. The suspension was a big improvement over the R100. Gas-filled rear shocks were quite unusual in a Japanese car in those days. Only costing $300 more than the R100, the RX2's performance was so good it won its class at Bathurst in 71 and 73, and there's still plenty around today. The RX2 was produced virtually unchanged until 1978, making it Mazda's longest production run of any rotary in its history. This coupe of Nathan's is a 73 Series 2, identified by the twin round headlights. Its original 12A made way a year ago for an Extend Port 13B, plus a little something extra.
I've got a nitrous injection system now. It's something different, something no one else has really got, really.
The nitrous system runs 50 horsepower jets and provides a noticeable increase in power. The standard brakes are pretty awful, so Nathan made a few improvements in that area too.
He opted for the RX4 disc brakes and front end and jumps in the back. Braking passage so much better now, it's stopped right on the spot.
And he's done a tidy job on the interior too. Those skinny front tyres are intended for serious drag racing, but we wondered if the standard diff with a Ford Econovan centre was really up to the job.
As of this stage, not at the moment, but I want a big 9-inch in her.
But Nathan's looking forward to more than just a big 9-incher.
Series 6 RX7.
In 1972, the RX3 arrived to sell alongside the RX2. While the R100 had been dropped the year before, its 10A motor lived on in the first RX3. Initially, it didn't have the power to match the RX2 and could only manage 17.6 second quarter miles. 2 years later, Mazda replaced the 10A with the single dizzy 12A. Although still slower in production form than the RX2, in racing trim its reputation took off. At the 1975 Bathurst race, it came 5th outright. Artistic is well named. It's owned by brothers Nazi and Ronnie, who get a lot out of this machine.
Cheap performance, don't need to spend much money to get a lot of horsepower out of them. Seemed to be a good head turner.
And for good reason. Nazi and Ronnie have gone all out to give this car a unique personality, and it's taken just 12 months since buying it bog standard for $3,000.
Was in a very good condition, rust in it and standard 12A.
But after spending $35,000, there's not much that hasn't been modified.
Start from the diff, it's got a 9-inch in it, it's got a mini spool 32 spline axles in it, it's got mandrel bent exhaust, dually straight through, it's got a super 5-speed in it, steel cased. At the front we've got HZ calipers, brand new discs and RX7 strut towers.
However, the first thing to go was the 12A.
The engine itself is a 13V peripheral port. It's got a 51mm Weber on it, an extended fuel bowl, Series 2 Dizzy.
Now with 250 horsepower, quarter-mile times have been pretty good and they're still improving.
At our second run we ran at 12.6, so after changing the ratios in the diff and should be able to drop the times a bit.
73, the RX4 arrived, Mazda's first rotary aimed at the luxury market. Bigger than its older brothers, it could still turn a 17.4 ET with its twin Dizzy 12A and 4-speed gearbox. When the Series 2 arrived a year later, with a 13B rated at 135 horsepower, Mazda quoted a 15.8 ET. Despite that potential, the RX4 has almost no racing history. A lone Bathurst attempt was unsuccessful, but it did well in a few overseas rallies. But to owners like Romeo, you can't go past an RX4.
It's just got its own sort of style. The character is different to the others. More character, more classier.
Like some kind of disease, the car's been passed around the same group of mates.
Well, we've all been friends, we've owned it, and we've passed along to each other, and everybody's done something to it wrong. Now we have to fix it up. Actually, I'm probably the last one to have it out of our mates, and everybody's just moved on.
While Romeo hasn't done up the car in a big way, he has made a few important engine changes. The original 13B had been bridge-ported, but he wasn't too happy with it.
That one went kaput, and in went the mould port, so bridgeport's just too loud, and like the horses, just too much power.
The mild port now puts out 190 horsepower after swapping the 4-barrel carby for a 48mm Weber.
Better pick up than the 4-barrel, yeah. It's just a bit of a shock that you get from the 4-barrel to the Weber. It's unbelievable. It's like driving something totally different.
It's totally different as having no clutch.
The clutch fork popped out. It's got a bearing on it, on top of the clutch, and so there goes the clutch.
But Romeo wouldn't let a minor problem prevent him getting home.
Oh, just stick it in third gear and just hope it gets home. No stopping.
The RX4's status as Mazda's luxury rotary was overtaken 3 years later by the release of the RX5. Based on RX4 running gear, the RX5 was longer, wider and 100 kilos heavier. Although successful on the Japanese market, in Australia and the US it was a flop. With a power to weight ratio slightly better than a 120Y, that was no surprise. Fat, slow and expensive, Mazda struggled to sell less than 2,000 in Australia, and very few survive today. However, if they'd all been built like Brad's RX5, maybe more would have been sold.
It's had a 13B fuel-injected intercooled turbo put into it.
The turbo helps it reach well over 250 horsepower.
And it's got the RX7 Series 5 5-speed gearbox in it.
The 5-speed replaced the original automatic, and you can still see the old gear symbols in the dash. The turbo's running 7 to 8 pounds boost and really gives the RX5 the power to overcome its weight disadvantage.
The horsepower you got with that engine, there is like a bit of lag like with the weight, but not much. It's actually built for a hill climb.
Brad hasn't run any quarter-mile times yet, but it showed its potential when we ran it against the far lighter R100. Since buying it, Brad's done virtually nothing to the car. All the modifications were done by the previous owner. This particular RX5 is a big improvement on its early history, and a good example of the sort of performance you can buy for around $5.5 grand.